Textual criticism. Textual criticism has to do with the discovery and establishment of the earliest text of each of our Gospels. It is still an elemental science of great importance in defining our written sources and sometimes in interpreting them. However, most of the problems in the field of textual criticism may be considered solved. Our Gospels, especially since they are like all ancient works and having been transmitted in manuscript form, have been beautifully preserved. Source criticism. This discipline has to do with the delineation of the sources and relationships of our Gospels. It tries to answer questions like the following: have our evangelists used oral or written sources? What can we surmise about these sources? Are the authors dependent upon the writings of each other? If so, what is the pattern of dependency? If it is true that one writer has used the writings of another, how does this affect our knowledge of the earliest forms of gospel traditions? A few students continue to devise new source theories, and I'm one of them. But as we know well, it is usually taken for granted today that Mark wrote our first gospel. According to this view, Matthew and Luke, quite independently, used Mark as a principal source. These writers also used a second source called Q. This is the simplest form of the theory of Markan priority. Whether Mark knew Q is a question for debate. Both Matthew and Luke have extensive passages which do not parallel each other. Where these come from, various researchers have long suggested may simply be from a document like Q or Q itself. There is no reason not to posit the anthological Q as a source for one Matthean-Lucan double tradition, two Matthean-Lucan agreements against Mark, and three Matthew's and Luke's unique materials. The division of the synoptic sources into two principal ones is actually based on the observation that Matthew and Luke share with each other and with Mark some 78 recognizable pericope divisions on the one hand, and on the other, that Matthew and Luke share a further 36 story or sayings units, which may be described as parallel. In other words, scholars long ago noted that our Gospels share many common stories and that it is possible to divide these into two kinds: of those found in all three synoptic Gospels, the 78, and those found only in Matthew and Luke, the 36. The groupings are respectively called the triple and double traditions. Now, from this fact alone, there is no necessity for supposing that our writers, or at least Matthew and Luke, used two different sources. Indeed, the simplest theory would be that Matthew, Mark, and Luke copied from the same source their 78 common pericope, and that Matthew and Luke then went on to copy 36 more from the same source. Theoretically, there is no reason to assume an interrelationship of some kind. What changes the scene is the addition of two further facts about the 78 and the 36. If we number the 78 pericope from 1 to 78, we find that it is possible to say that 61 of these appear in the same general order in all three Gospels. We can now talk about a common pericope skeleton. On the other hand, if we follow the same procedure with our 36 common Matthean-Lucan pericope, we arrive at the amazing conclusion that only one of these can be said to be given the same place in pericope sequence. This suggests that Matthew and Luke do not by themselves know where, or at least care where, they place the double materials, but are influenced by Mark in placing many of the triple pericope. We must now suppose that our synoptic gospels are interrelated. Probably Matthew and Luke do not influence the writings of each other, but it seems certain that Mark is somehow in between these works, causing a distinct common order. If we ask how Mark can cause order in this fashion, we can easily arrive at the conclusion that Matthew and Luke have copied from him. They have then copied also from some other source, but perhaps due to Mark, they do not follow the order of the second source, but attempt to fit its stories into their borrowed outline from Mark. This is exactly the way the theory of Markan priority, otherwise known as the two-document hypothesis, came into being. The document lying behind the triple material is none other than Mark. The double material derives from a document which came to be called Q. Almost all New Testament students had accepted this basic division of two sources by the turn of the past century.